We're going to be seeing how exactly Tucker Carlson is going to sell the white replacement theory, which is a continuation of white civil rights, in which they think that white people are the ones who marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and they are the real oppressed people and not the people of color of this nation, like the Latino or the Black Americans that differentiate themselves from African Americans because there's a difference between the migration, the people who grew here from the slave trade, versus the Latino who has always been here, which is the nativist mindset that is always going to be remaining here, which they're in the biggest fear of because we are the numerous amount of people versus the others. So again, we're going to be seeing exactly how white men are stoking fear to radicalize people and turn them into an ethnic ideology of hatred because they want to encapsulate the victimhood that they make fun of all the time so they can weaponize it the same way that they saw it weaponized against them.
Mentioned several times the great replacement and the idea that many nations seem to be pushing towards the elimination of European peoples and their diaspora. And this is really important because you were probably the first person on major television shows to make it okay to say the phrase anti-white. I actually distinctly remember back when I was a teacher, you bullying my now colleague Chris Rufo into saying the word anti-white live on air. But Chris has obviously done great work on that, but just was hesitant to use that term at the time. And now he does because it's just too obvious. It's just everywhere, and nobody can really deny it at this point. But the continued conversation about the great replacement, I think, is really important. But a lot of people who have heard you speak, and I'll be honest, at times I have felt the same way, have heard you speak about Islam in a manner which seems like it might be okay if Islam became a major religion in the United States, if it became something that was a common feature in the West. And just looking at what's happening in Europe and increasingly in the United States, it's very clear that perhaps Islamic populations, if they are not the hammer, at the very least, they seem to be the anvil of breaking Western civilization. And
Yeah.
personally, while I think it's fantastic, as you say, we should not hate people, and I'm more than happy for Muslims to live in their lands in peace and security and have prosperous lives. I just don't want them in the West. I think that they're incompatible with Christian religion and civilization. And I'm seeing the evidence of this sprouting up in places like Texas, where we're building record number of mosques, this kind of thing. And I think a lot of people would just like to hear ultimately that this is something that it is not a long-term expectation in the West, that it's okay if we deport Muslims that should not be here and we ban Muslim immigration while still understanding that we don't need to make them our eternal enemies abroad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for preserving the demographic mix of America from 1969, the year I was born. Okay. Demographic, racial mix, linguistic, religious. So that was an amazing country I was born into. Still amazing, much less amazing because of demographic changes. So I don't know if I could be clearer about that. The reason that I often make that point, and I know that it's, I mean, basically the hatred of Muslims, whatever that means, is that's like the main effect of 9/11. Now, what was 9/11? Well, we don't know because the US government won't declassify documents that are 25 years old. So we're kind of guessing, right? But about what that actually was. But I know the effect of it. It had two effects. One was to scare the crap out of everyone in the United States about Islam as a religion. I certainly felt that way. And two was to dramatically increase Muslim immigration into the United States. And that was abetted by the very same people who were pushing all these Middle Eastern wars. So I guess I just note something very obvious, which is we're getting played. Okay. Islam may be the anvil. It's definitely not the hammer. Okay, that's just a fact. Same in Europe. Who pushed for massive Islamic immigration into Europe and Scandinavia, the Nordic countries? It wasn't it was the same people who have banned any criticism of what's happening in Gaza. So, okay, that's the first thing I would note. Second thing I would note is that radical Islam, and I spent many years traveling, 25 years traveling in the Middle East, in almost every country in the Middle East, and a lot of time there. And radical Islam has declined as a political force. And I'm glad. I'm really grateful. Radical Islam was a real force in Europe. But in the actual Middle East, maybe because all the crazies moved to Europe, I don't know. But it's just a fact. And there has been a concurrent rise in religious extremism, in political religious expression, and it's among Jews, and it's among evangelical Christians. And the millennialist vision, that's like this kind of marrying your eschatology to your politics, that is a phenomenon still. It's a super dangerous phenomenon. But that's going on among evangelical Christians, a minority of evangelical Christians and a minority of Jews. But that's where religious radicalism is rising. I know this because I live here and I travel a lot. So that's not an attack on anybody. It's just, and the third thing is that there is clearly an effort to foment religious conflict in the United States. And having seen religious conflict and traveled to sites of religious conflict and watched its generational effects, I don't want that here. So I don't want anyone to come here. Trump has not shut down immigration into this country. In fact, it's accelerated in ways that are really destructive, which is to say through legal means. H-1Bs, refugee resettlement, that's still ongoing. That has not stopped. In other words, the demographic change in the United States is still proceeding apace. And if you tell yourself, well, they shut down the borders, they did, and God bless Trump for doing that. But that doesn't mean that the replacement of the population of the United States has stopped. No.
So a lot of this seems like the replacement theory he's pushing is that the religious aspects are causing a culture clash. This culture clash is something that a lot of people are oftentimes gonna rival with racial issues, because a lot of these people are Muslim, which usually means brown Muslim, which usually means when there's white people who look like they're white but they really practice Islam, are going to be pushing a lot of those progressive values that a lot of leftists use, like they did for the Shia revolution, in order to use the leftist organizations in order to push their Muslim belief systems, and then call bigotry or victimhood in order to enact a continuous fight against the right wing. This, of course, is going to be coincidentally a bunch of Christian Protestants fighting against a bunch of Muslims, which is, of course, a replication of what is happening in the Middle East through warfare, which is why you'll have the Jewish and Christians fighting against Muslims here in America, which is usually the bigoted clash of the right-wing Republicans against the left-wing bigoted tokenization that they use to get their votes, which is why the left is oftentimes seeing as a lot of their voters come from migration or people of the culture that is easy to offend, so they can use the currency of victimhood in order to enact a self-defense of currency spending and inflating the cost of victimhood, so that people, when they attack a lot of Islam, they're going to be seen as people that are, how do you say, easy to defend, because a lot of them are going to be seen as people that are raging a lot of bigotry in a lot of the Republican spheres. So they're going to utilize that in order to make their self defendable ideology of pro-migration. However, once that pro-migration starts to take off, it's going to turn into what they believe is like a civil war, where that integration process starts to fall apart and everyone starts to hate each other. This is, of course, what a lot of white people are scared of, because the integration process is being interrupted by what they believe is a lot more espionage rather than an actual integration process. Since a lot of these people are accused of taking their money and sending it back home to another country, or using that as the same excuse they use for the Latinos or any other race. And of course, people are going to use this as like stealing credit for it, or credit for the understanding of what's happening, and then they're gonna self-divide their parties, because a lot of the people on the left are too busy spreading out the currency of tokenism. Each one wants their own token, each one wants their own currency to spend, which is going to cause a lot of infighting in America through cultural means. And then that cultural means is going to, of course, take a lot of white Christian Protestants, the idea that they're going to have to remain in the ideology of returning law and order to a situation where there was no war or no fighting or no bigoted clashing, that is now being polarized and utilized for politics altogether. Now, I think the replacement theory is something, of course, that is white supremacist and racist. However, a lot of people think that the ecosystem protection system that a lot of people that are going to fight over is that white people deserve to exist, which sounds like Palestine deserves to exist, which sounds like Israel deserves to exist, which sounds like Latin America and the Native Americans here deserve to exist, which is going to be a continuation of a historical war against the people that they have been at war with since the beginning. But now with a lot of Islam, these people do not fear the direct cultural aspect of the Latinos, since they're more Catholic or Christian, but the ones of Islam, because they're the ones with the idea of scaring the white man into what they believe is a radicalized terroristic front, which is more taunting, more agitative, more aggressive, and more racist, because they're going to be pushing Arab supremacy or Arab nationalism, and then it's going to clash with the Christian nationalism or white nationalism, which is going to have a fight between the two that can take advantage of the most idiots. Which, if you saw my earlier video, Tucker Carlson's not scared of the people that are dumb, but scared of the people who can control the dumb. And that's why a lot of the times when you import people from the third world, they say a lot of them are uneducated, they are lacking resources, because a lot of these people will take a lot of time and energy in order to push what they believe is the ideology that should be independence and liberation from the needing the support and dependence on another person. which is why they fear a lot of this, because a lot of simple people will be easily taken advantage of, too busy working, too busy being victimized, that their ideology is no longer going to be trying to get a normal job and live your normal life, that now it's going to be all about your culture. It's going to be all about which party you align with, which, of course, a lot of the conservative men may side with right wing conservatism. But because in this country, a lot of them are bigoted toward Islam, a lot of them are going to be herded toward the left and use them for votes, use them for support, and use their currency of tokenism and the ideology of that in order to defend their ideas, which is why this is going to turn into a big war against culture clashing, because now they're not going to be able to tell the difference between an Islamic person or a Latino, since they're both brown and invaders in the eyes of the white man, who is now having to look at a bunch of unmelanated people, which are white, and then try to go and gather them up to create a community that'll defend themselves without getting called a bigot, which they get used to. And then they're going to fight together against the groups of which are brown, which, of course, historically speaking, the Latino's going to take the fall for this. Everyone's going to team up on the Latino, because you can already see that with people saying the Latino problem, the Hispanic problem against ICE, and they're using that talking point with white liberals and racists on the left that are going to be pushing continuously to blame the Latino, so that all the blame goes away from the Arabs or the Islamic people, so they can continuously tag on and pile on the biggest majority of the minorities, which is, of course, the natural inhabitants of this land, which is going to replicate the actual war in Israel and Palestine, because the natural people here in America are the Native Americans, which have a new label that everyone relabels them as Latino, which happened to Palestinians historically as well. So this is, of course, going to reimagine or recreate a lot of instances of fighting that happens in the Middle East, and Tucker Carlson and the white people as a whole are terrified that this is going to end up leaching out, or leaking out rather, through the southern borders, through ideology and radicalization that can turn people against the white man and the white race as a whole, which is going to be what they believe as an exterminationist project against white people and their aggression toward a lot of the culture of white people, which is going to be an attack on capitalism and an attack on the ideology of Christian Protestants. But at the same time, if you took that same notion and attacked their religion, they call you bigoted. But if you attack their religion, they'll say it's fair, which is going to create a group of white people, black people, and brown people who are Christian, who are going to have to fight against this one race group that is a bunch of victimhooded minded people, which is going to cause a great divide in America, because now you have to be this currency driven person where you have to check your skin color's currency like it's a Bitcoin, going up and down in accordance to the trends on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. And then you're going to be someone who's going to have to play the system like a horse track to see what you get out of supporting each group. And then everything will become transactional. And of course, this is what a society of capitalism does, is it exploits the situation in order to benefit from it, to profit from it, which is, of course, going to cause chaos and mayhem, which is a stock market of the human race.
Oh, it's accelerated. So legally. So into that mix, if you throw encouragement to hate people on the basis of their religion, not their behavior, but just their religion, you're going to destroy the country that my grandchildren, I hope, will inherit. And who is doing that? Well, it's the same people pushing for the war with Iran, a war that has no conceivable benefit to the United States. So I'm not, by the way, a champion of Islam at all. I'm a Christian more so than ever, and I mean it in a more heartfelt way than ever, which, and by Christian, I mean pro-Jesus. Okay, pro-Jesus. Mike Huckabee doesn't talk a lot about Jesus because he's not allowed to or something, but I believe in Jesus and his example, and I believe that Jesus is the only way to God. So obviously I'm not a Muslim, by definition I'm not. But I don't want religious conflict here. And these people, some people are pushing for it. And if you ask people, I was with an evangelical minister recently who I like, who I think is smart. And I said, like, why are you defending mass murder in Gaza? Like, why would you defend that? Is this what Jesus would want? And I haven't even been that involved in commenting on the Gaza thing, but like, it's just so obvious that that's not, no Christian can support that. And he goes, well, I get it, but in the end, we have the same enemies. And I said, who are your enemies? Islam. I was like, well, they're killing a lot of Christians, actually. And there are Christians in Gaza. They're being killed too. But moreover like, what? Just because, okay, I get it. I don't want this to be an Islamic country at all. I'm not working for an Islamic country. I love America, period. But listen to yourself. And he couldn't, because he had been worked into this frenzy about mosques in Texas as a way to cement his loyalty to a foreign country. And it's gotten to a point where he refuses to criticize their massacre of children. So that's kind of what's going on. And all I'm trying to do is tell people that's what's going on. Okay. I'm sorry if you don't like to hear it. You're being manipulated. I worked at Fox News for 15 years. I have some sense of what's going on in the propaganda space. Okay. And that's what's going on. So what they're doing, as they always do, which is, and by they, I mean the enemies of God, of decency, of truth, of kindness toward others, of love, what they're doing is leveraging your best instincts against you. Always. Your instinct toward hospitality has been leveraged in order to get you to support or stop complaining about open borders. Your view that God's love is universal has been leveraged against you, so you can't kind of like say anything about the replacement of your ethnic group because, hey, God loves everybody. True. But this is really dark. You can't say that. Your care for other people is leveraged against you in the vaccination campaign of 2021 and 2022. It was like, don't you care about your grandparents? You have to take the shot, which will potentially kill your children. But don't you care? So this is what evil does. It takes your best instincts and uses them against you.
Hey guys, if you've been watching
So a lot of their fear seems to be again they're pushing this identity that this good nature, good faith is something that a lot of you are going to be hated for. Which, from my experience talking to Christians, they want to press the mercy, which a lot of that mercy tends to expire when it comes to warfare because you start to see the manipulation people use against you, and because that manipulation cannot be addressed because they'll play the victim card or they'll play the card that you're a bad person. A lot of these people are going to have to what I call increase their currency of victimhood, which is, of course, they're going to play that everything you're doing is offensive, everything that you're saying is offensive, so they can increase the discussion on their side by not having anything actually intellectual other than you're just being a racist or you're being mean to people, which is why it's going to cause a big fight with a lot of the white Christian Protestants because they already played that game a long time ago. And of course, when you learn from them first, you're going to learn second because this land was conquered by a lot of Christian Protestants. A lot of that racism and hatred that comes from other countries here are going to get spotted very quickly because they already enslaved a lot of Latinos and a lot of black people in order to keep their society peaceful, which is why they're going to have a lot of victim-hooded people going around saying you're just a racist, you just said a mean word, and they're not going to actually have anything intelligible to say because they're going to be playing the image of increasing the currency of their race so they can spend it with white people, spend it with people who play victim with them, and then when they're all spent out and they have nothing left to say, they're going to end up capitulating to whoever has money or resource, which is buying your freedom, which is, of course, why it's so annoying to people because when they upplay their currency, they start to realize that they're accidentally uploading the currency of white people, which is logic and reason and science that they push because it's going to make them more logical and more reasonable to the people of which are the same race as you because they'll start to understand that they're just trying to talk to you through sense, through understanding, which is why a lot of that makes a lot of people misunderstand the basic English, the basic language, because a lot of them just don't want to listen to what they believe is civilization because they'll play it's racist, they'll play it's offensive in order to make their currency worth more so they can hang out with the rich and the powerful and the people that are mainly pushing this agenda so they can tokenize them, create a little farm plantation owner of all these people who are simple and not really thinking, and then use them as talking points for each and every single one of them, which is why this is such a scary thing for a lot of white Christian Protestants because they've seen this used not only against white people, but they've seen it used against a lot of black and brown people in order to woke scold them and divide the left continuously, which is why accusations and allegations are used as a weapon. They have people false accusing people. They have people false with false allegations against people, and they push this extreme purity test that none of them can pass themselves. They're just good at manipulating yes men or sycophants because they want to address the cult-like mentality so that you can just say you're monolithing them, which is why they single out people and kill them in accordance to what I believe killing is, which is attacking people in accordance to what they believe is a great enough way to destroy their status or their symbol so they can establish a superiority complex over you, which is the same exact complex they're trying to destroy on the white side. So they're just trying to take a lot of the talking points a lot of white people have and embody it themselves. This is why a lot of these people are not going to be able to succeed because when you go to America and you try to fight American politics with a bunch of white supremacy, the bigotry and hatred that you press against a bunch of black people and Latinos, calling them Uncle Toms, Tico Tacos, or subhumans because you will accuse them and put allegations on them, then you're going to start to realize that you're going to get a solidified force of people who believe in law and order, due process, and law and the civil order of humanity, which is why it's going to be an issue when the left and the sock dem left is going to try to uplift themselves because they're going to be using tokenism and purity testing, which is going to fail because they won't have the intelligence to back it. Their intelligence is instead going to be agitation, it's going to be racism, it's going to be tokenization, which everyone's going to see through because it's going to be a invigoration or what I would call a reemergence of bigotry that they would be the source of because they don't want to side with any intelligible people in the civil rights movement, because the civil rights movement again is just tokenized people that are being used as shields instead of actual intellectual battles or debates, because they're all going to hide behind a bunch of racist people and class privilege, which of course even Tucker Carlson mentioned is going to come from the educated people from colleges, not the poor people that are seen as a lesser, because the lesser people that they see as third worlder or working class people are not going to be educated like the people from colleges. So they both already agree on the same premise of using the college educated people, which is another word for the class privileged, which is always going to be the same perspective they're all fighting on behalf of. It's just going to be about who can radicalize the most people to support. And therefore, the radicalization effect, the ability to get people to kill and rape and slaughter and then hide all the evidence and say they were doing it for justice and honor, which is a lot of the issues that they have with a lot of people, is that a lot of these people are customer service speakers and not actual people who can radicalize people to terrorism, because the people who radicalize people to terrorism are already on the left and they're already people that are already known for spreading bigoted, disgusting talking points and defended purely because of their skin color being white and their culture being seen as brown, which is a tokenization of the culture again, so they can sell the currency continuously. Which is why the left has a big issue with the black and brown people, because they always see through their lies and always see through their bigoted perspectives, because they're always using black and brown people like a plantation where they can sell them en masse to the highest bidder, which is anyone that will support their ideas and their ideology. Which is why it's a big, big, big issue that a lot of people are not being represented on the left when it comes to people of color, because a lot of them are more in relation to what they would call civilization, or the conceptualization of just siding with the people who give them money, resource, and a job, rather than the left who just gives you promises they cannot actually follow through with. Which is why building on the left is one of my goals, because I'm trying to create something that's actually a representation of what it means to defend someone who actually matters on the left, rather than this right-wing discussion that they just re-embodied because they don't know what they're doing in political science. They just scream class privilege and say they come from rich neighborhoods and understand how to win. They're just siding with rich people. This is why a lot of them just see plantations. Then none of the black or brown people who come here to America, who immigrate here, or even the white people, are just going to continuously side with the rich and think that they're being liberated when they're just being purchased like slaves, or purchased like people they want to hang out with through friendships or sex or any ideology they use in order to solidify their bonds. This whole concept is just going to continue, that they're going to hate people of color no matter what, because the people of color are going to be selling themselves like slaves, which is what they're going to be warning about, but they're not going to be able to warn them all because not all of them are going to be wise enough in their perspective to be able to understand what is happening. Now, this is one of the reasons why white supremacy, or the white nationalist perspective of white replacement theory, is such a potent thing that spreads around, because a lot of people already know this. A lot of people have spoken about it, but the ideology of why this is happening is going to continue so long as people are ignorant. But as soon as they become educated, they're going to start getting leaders that are actually understanding on what is actually happening, which is why a lot of people are trying to put me down, put other people down, because I spoke about this in public with multiple leaders, and those leaders tried to put me down and attack me based on this purity, this white supremacy. They use accusations, they use allegations, and they will try to destroy your image because they believe in Darwinism, which is white supremacist thinking on the left, which is why the left will continuously collapse inward on itself, because they just want to put a kiosk salesman in front of you and then tell them lies to tell you lies, so that you can feel better about the fact that a lot of the ideas that you're fighting against take actual intellectual capabilities. So they'll tell you that they'll speak for you, but when they speak for you, they don't give actual good talking points. They instead just complain. And so the issue then becomes, how do we fight back? You're going to have to figure out on the next episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to leave a comment below to tell me what you think. A lot of this currency exploitation is pretty much Bitcoin, but for skin color. So you're going to have to be very wary. A lot of the left is going to use this against you. A lot of the right's going to use it against you. This is a pretty much a new age war against cultural clashing. And it's what I keep telling people every time. It's a pretty much a race war. So there's a hardcore race war in America, a civil war that's erupting from the ideology of just pushing whose currency's worth more, whose skin color's worth more, whose word can be used to hurt people more. And it's just going to be a bunch of fighting with a bunch of people with allegations and accusations. Like, I think Tucker Carlson's been accused of being a white supremacist. Hassan Piker's been accused of like traveling for sex across the country and excusing rapes and then being made fun of for it. Tucker Carlson, the same, but with white people. It's going back and forth. You got people on the right wing, like Tim Pool, saying how to do civil wars and that white replacement theory is real. Then you rip off his beanie and he's bald and he gets like really emotional over it. You got like Steven Crowder, who hates his wife, who's accused of like beating his wife and hating his women. You got a bunch of accusations, allegations, and it's really not about who's better. It's about who's better at lying and who's better at convincing people of that lie. Because now it's no longer an age of who's actually pure, but who can radicalize the simple people. Which is why Tucker Carlson's biggest fear is getting people from colleges who can radicalize. Which is why radicalization or terrorism is the biggest concern in America, because right now the biggest threat to American democracy is white supremacy.